Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about. I actually changed the title of the talk just a little bit to digital identity management. But for the most part, we're going to be focusing on sort of the concept of securing your user accounts because that's probably the main thing that everyone thinks of when they think of their identity management. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll just do a couple of intros. There's a lot of familiar faces here, so I apologize to those who have heard this story before, but just want to, for those who I may not have met before, just do a little introduction to me both within SL and real life as well. So I'm Brian Aviator. I've been participating in Second Life since 2006. Um, I know if you go look at my profile, it says 2007. This is actually the second avatar I created and the one that I use as my primary, but I did join in 2006. Over the years, I've created quite a few educational spaces within Second Life, and I have some listed on the slide. The oldest, going back to the end of 2006, is the LGBTQ History Museum and Cultural Center, which still exists in Second Life to this day. It is, as of today, in the Black Slough region of Second Life, but it will be moving this weekend to the Pippin region of Second Life. So same museum, but will I'm sorry, LGBTQ will not be moving to Pippin. It's going to be moving to McLean. So sorry about that. I've got a lot of moves going on and wanted to make that clear. However, the Museum of Computing History and the Museum of Telecommunications, which are located in currently in Blacksow, they will be moving uh, to Pippin, and I'll spell McLean because it's actually McLean. I know it sounds like McLean. Um, and those two are basically what they sound like. The Computing History Museum. We've done a tour here before for that. It is a history of computing, starting with the oldest known computing device, the abacus, all the way through modern day topics such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Um, the Museum of Telecommunications focuses on telecom, starting with early, optical signals using lights and smoke, all the way through modern wireless technologies. Also have Brevin Cat Island, which is in the Brevin region, and that's an educational build about our feline friends, something dear to my heart. And the latest creation that's not on permanent display at this time was the Moleseum. That was actually created and was displayed over the summer for the Bellisaria Mole celebration, and it features information about the history of the building of the moles and the Linden Department of Public Works throughout the ages of Second Life. It starts around when the LDBW was created in about 2009 and goes through the modern day. I am hoping to build a permanent home for it, but it will make an appearance at some events in the meantime. So that's my work in Second Life. A little bit about who I am because we're going to be talking about computer security today. And one of the things that you should be asking yourself is, should I trust this person and what they're telling me about security? Because this is an important concept. So to give you a little bit of my background, my name is Brian Perry. I'm the real life typist behind Brian Aviator. I do have a degree in computer science, and I have 34 years in life science research and development information technology. And so a lot of what I do um, has very strong requirements for data integrity and security because while we're dealing with people's lives in many cases. So, and I list on the slide some of the areas I work in: clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, which is the discipline of studying the safety of medical products such as drugs or medical devices or biologics, gene therapies, etc. And as a result, in the course of my work, I'm implementing and deploying technologies that deal with PHI, personal health information, and PII, personally identifiable information. And we're going to be talking a bit about those as they might pertain to you personally as well in the future and how you can protect those in this presentation. And then obviously cybersecurity is a component of all of that to ensure data integrity and privacy and security. You really do have to implement strong cybersecurity. So that's who I am. Whether or not that qualifies me as somebody you should listen to on this, I'll let you decide for yourselves. But that is who I am. So as a computer scientist, I promise I'm not going to get too heavy into the technical weeds of these topics, but I'm happy to always talk about those to the extent that I understand them. And if you would want to have side discussions, but I'm trying to keep this with a reasonable level so that everyone can get something useful out of it. And I'm going to start off just by giving a definition of how I see digital identity management, because I just want to make sure we're level set and that we all understand what I'm referring to today. And it involves, managing things like your user accounts for all of your websites, applications, systems that you use, even your devices and computers themselves, the identity that you have on them, the usernames, the passwords, etc., are what we will be speaking about primarily today. Management of your digital identity is ensuring the security so that only you or those that you designate appropriately have access to your digital information and assets. In addition, it's about managing the privacy of your digital assets. And I'll talk a little bit more about digital assets because it encompasses everything about us that's electronic, and information wise. Though particularly people are sensitive about things like PII, personally identifiable information, so things like your name, your address, in the United States, your social security number, or your national ID number in other countries and such, your state driver's license numbers, things like that here in the US, as well as personal health information. Which includes your electronic records, your EHRs, your electronic health records that are stored with your doctors and clinicians and their support staff and such. In addition, it's information about which medical drugs, devices, supplies that you buy when you go to your local drugstore or order online. That's part of your personal health. All of that put together can put together a pretty complete picture of your health. For instance, if we know that somebody is going to a pharmacy to buy a pregnancy test, well, there's a chance that person is potentially pregnant, and now we know something about them. So there's a lot of information out there that exists in electronic form that is both PII and PHI, and some of it you may not even be aware of or have any control over, and directly. So we're going to talk about that a bit. Okay, why should you manage your digital identity? Well, at the end of the day, managing your digital identity is all about managing risk. The fact of the matter is, we all have to participate in electronic digital records in our modern lives. It is, even if you don't use a computer or a smartphone or use any online services, all of the businesses that you work with are still generating electronic records about you. That includes the stores you visit, the doctors you go to, the employer you work for, any educational institutions that you work at, teach at, attend. There's just volumes of electronic assets being generated about you. many of which you don't ever see or even come in contact with directly. And some of the risks that you need to manage, financial risks. If someone gets access to your bank accounts or your stock brokerage accounts or your retirement accounts, that could have potentially devastating consequences for you. There are also privacy risks. I note among the educational community here in Second Life, many of us tend to be open about our real life identities and tie them to our virtual identities here in Second Life. I'm one of them. I just did it in this presentation, in fact. But there are plenty of people that use Second Life that either live in a place where they feel unsafe or in a situation, or they just really want to have a virtual presence separate from their real life presence. And so privacy is something people think about here in Second Life a lot, but it's also something we think about everywhere. Particularly as there are all kinds of security breaches around the world, and our data is getting out there. Privacy is something everyone should care about. A lot of people say, well, I have nothing to hide. Why should I worry about privacy? Well, there's a lot of situations where it absolutely matters. For instance, perhaps, you do something somewhere that gets the attention of law enforcement. Now, what that is perhaps not a big deal, probably doesn't result in an arrest or any other kind of problem, but you may have just generated a record about yourself. And do you know in 20 years from now who's going to be in charge of our political climate anywhere in the world, and what they might consider to be something they want to know about or punish people for or act on? That record's out there. Whatever it may be, that may be something you're targeted for someday. So I think everyone should care. And that's maybe an extreme example, but caring about the personal data that exists out there should matter to everyone. The other thing is, as we all live more online lives to some degree, and I don't mean just here in Second Life, I'm talking about social media, websites, just our presence in the online world, um, sort of the idea of a reputation or a personal brand matters. If something were to be divulged about an individual, it could harm their reputation or their brand online, and so that matters. So again, it's the things we generate and create online, but also all of the other records that get created about us that matter. And I'll be talking about some of those as we go along. Okay, so the next thing, I've tried to level set what I think identity management is and why we should do it. I want to go ahead now and actually talk about tools and tactics for identity management, because that's, I think, what many of you came here for, wanting to know what can I do about this. And I'm going to cover a few of those today. So first of all, one thing I always recommend that everyone do and have is a digital identity inventory. What is this? This inventory should include a list of all of your sort of digital assets. Be there user accounts to websites, so your user accounts for Second Life, your user accounts for LinkedIn, for Twitter, for X, for Facebook, whatever you use out there, all of those. In addition, you might have user IDs at your work organization. You might have it, perhaps you have a personal computer network set up at home where you have security in mind, etc. Those things should be in your inventory because the collection of them matters, as well as any other systems you might use, either internally at your work, at your, out on the internet, etc. List them out. You might be surprised at how many you have out there. And in fact, most people, if they try to create one of these from scratch, will miss so many things that they forgot that they've set up or created. But when you do this identity inventory, the next step after you have the list is assign a risk classification to each of them. And typically, I recommend using three classifications: high, medium, low. And that classification should be based on the risk. What if this identity were compromised? What is the risk to my life, to my well-being, to my mental health, to my, etc. What are the risks? Um, and certainly some of the highest ones that you should be thinking about are financial. So your banks. Almost everybody has online access or mobile applications for access to their bank. So that is a high risk um, system. Uh, Doing so can give you access to your money. Now, in most countries like the United States, most European, there are protections in place that if your bank accounts are compromised, you can get your money back, etc. But going through that is a huge hassle. Um, if you have to change your account number, it means you might have to get new checks if you use paper checks, or update everybody that either does direct deposits to you or takes money out of your account for services or payments. So it's a pain. It's easier to keep it secure. And of course, healthcare and health system records. And this is pretty broad. This might mean your doctor's office, the medical group they belong to, any hospitals or healthcare systems. Here in the United States, healthcare insurers. In other jurisdictions, it might be your nationalized health organization like the NHS in the UK, etc. But it also includes things like your online accounts to online drugstores, or your local drugstore that has website access. Because again, your prescription records can tell a lot about you. It also applies to things like any sort of support that you might get from healthcare providers like mental health care or physical therapy or other kinds of therapeutic support that you might get. Those all are records that are online, that you want to try to make sure are reasonably secure. And so if you have access to your portal through your different doctors, which almost all of them seem to be doing these days, make sure you've set up your accounts and they're secure using many of the things we talk about. Another one that people don't always appreciate the level of risk are their electronic mail services. A lot of people say, well, most of the email I get is just from family and friends, and I it's not that important if somebody finds out what's in there. Well, don't forget that your electronic mail accounts are also typically tied to many of your other online identities. Almost every service or system out there has some ability to reset your password, such as, so for instance, if you forget your password to Facebook, they can send you an email to allow you to change the password or set a new one. So access to your mail account virtually, if it's breached, virtually can give someone access to all of your other accounts. So ultra high risk. It's also a place where you might get notifications from your doctor's office or your pharmacy or things like that. So electronic mail should be one of your highest risk items to protect because it is the key to a lot of other services. In addition, wireless services and mobile cloud services. Why? Some people say, well, I hate my cell phone half of the time, and I wouldn't even care if it went away because it just annoys me most of the time. But the fact of the matter is, again, a lot of accounts, you've tied them to your mobile number, usually to receive text messages or alerts. Many services allow you to reset your password by sending a text message as well, in addition to email. And so there's a lot of risk in having your mobile phone number compromised. And in addition, mobile cloud services. So if you use an iPhone, that's iCloud. If you use an Android device, it's the Google Android services. Again, you want to keep those protected because they are the keys to your device. Typically through iCloud or through Google's services, you can reset your device passwords. You can wipe your device. You can virtually control your mobile devices. So that should be in the highest risk category. Moving along, some things that I typically put in the medium. However, you have to assess your own individual circumstances. So, for instance, um, I have virtual worlds and other digital assets listed as medium because for many people, it is not as high a risk as their financial, etc. Though for those of us who've spent years generating digital assets in these virtual worlds and who have presences here and land, a lot of land and etc. Maybe you would want to consider it a higher risk in those. I certainly consider my Second Life accounts that have control of my assets to be high risk items as well, that get as strong a protection as possible. Other ones are shopping sites. So for instance, your Amazon account if you use Amazon, any online shopping site. Again, most of the time, not a huge risk, but if compromised, somebody could order things in your name and send to themselves, and it would get billed to your credit card if you save your credit card on these services, etc. So those are at least a medium. The other one to think about is social media. So again, this goes back to sort of the whole idea of the personal brand or reputation. Social media, be that Facebook, Twitter/X, LinkedIn, any of those that we use, there's a potential risk to your reputation if someone were to get a hold of them and post things in your name. So again, think about that. And then lower on the risk scale are things like blog sites, or information sites that require you to set up an ID so that they can personalize the service, but in general are not things where you're super exposed. However, if you are a blogger and you are publishing on your blog, then that probably moves up to a medium or a high for you, because again, going back to that sort of brand reputation risk. And then many gaming sites. A lot of games, require accounts to be able to do online playing or moving between devices, but keeping your progress, etc. However, and I know some people class Second Life as a game. Others look at it as virtual world platform. We won't get into that, but Second Life certainly is. For folks who consider a game might be a lower risk thing. Um, but again, there's could be high value digital assets. There are some people, that play, online MMO games like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14, that have spent substantial time playing these games, amassing experience, amassing virtual items that empower their presence there, and they value those, and so they might want to consider those medium or high risk depending on their importance. So, again, I'm throwing some risk classifications here and examples, but you really have to think about these things personally and what they mean to you and how high a risk they present to you as an individual. Okay, moving on. One of the best tools that you can use to manage your digital identity are what are called account and password management programs. Um, if there's one thing I'm suggesting today, it is that you do this. If you don't already use an account and password manager, think about doing it right away. It will improve your security greatly if you implement it and follow some of the steps I'm talking about today. And why is that the case? Well, it makes it a lot easier to manage all of your accounts and passwords. You don't have to remember them. If you use a account password manager, your user IDs, your passwords are stored within it. You can make the passwords much stronger. You don't have to make them memorable, which can make them more vulnerable to being compromised. And as a side benefit, you get your inventory of your digital identity items, at least from an account standpoint. If you're storing all your accounts and passwords, which is something I do in account password managers, you have your inventory. It's largely built in there. So you get your inventory as part of this. So if you want to do a digital, one way to start is get one of these and start moving all of your accounts into it and generating new secure passwords. Other things that account password managers do that are useful are once you have all your accounts in there, they will notify you if any of the sites that you have accounts on have been reached recently. So for instance, if I'm just going to say site XYZ, I won't name any names one way or the other, is compromised, you'll get a notification. Hey, you have an account with site XYZ. It has been compromised. You should immediately change your password. Um, and that's useful because it's real hard to keep up with the compromises that are occurring these days. If you follow the news at all, there are security breaches multiple times a day at many of the things that people use. So it's good to know, and these sites automatically scan for these things and notify you if you're affected. The other really, really useful feature of these is when you go to log on to a site, most of these tools are integrated with the web browser, or it can be integrated with mobile applications, etc., so that when you're logging in, they recognize the site that you're on and they can auto fill in your username and password for you. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, isn't that a risk? Couldn't I accidentally be sending those to the wrong sites, etc., because it's too easy? All well implemented password managers, and certainly all the ones I'm listing here on this slide, and we'll talk about them in a minute, um, they verify that the site that they're giving the credentials to is the site where you created them. So if you create a user ID and password, or store a user ID and password for your banking site in a password manager, when you go to use that password manager to fill in your banking credentials, if you're on a different URL, perhaps somebody created an imposter site to try to steal your credentials, the password manager will not allow. Hello, folks, I'm back. Sorry about that. For some reason, this wireless headset doesn't do this ever in Teams or any other thing, but in Second Life, it always seems to want to disconnect about every 30 minutes or so. I'm not sure. I'll have to figure out what happened. I know the kitty didn't eat the headset dongle, although she has been rather cantankerous today, shall we say. But anyway, I apologize for the interruption. Continuing on. Ava, good one on Bitwarden. I literally just ran out of room. But there are a number of ones out there, and I will mention it. But I did want to just again mention this autofill of username and passwords. Verifying the site is a great protection from you accidentally providing your credentials to an imposter site. So it is a very useful feature. In addition, password managers can do additional levels of security beyond users and passwords that include things like multi-factor authentication or passkeys, both of which we're going to talk about in a minute or two. And lastly, they allow you to easily generate unique, lengthy, strong passwords for each site that are unique. It is incredibly important that the passwords you use are never reused among sites, because if they are, if one site is compromised and the password gets found out, uh, one of the tactics often used by folks looking to do wrong is to effectively try that password and user ID combination on a bunch of other sites. And you'd be surprised how successful they are because many people reuse passwords. So it is very important. I list a number here. 1Password, Dashlane, LastPass. As Ava mentioned, Bitwarden is another one. Um, there's also the folks at Proton that have Proton Mail and a bunch of other secure sites and tools. They have a password manager. Um, Apple just released iOS, the most recent versions of iOS, macOS, etc. this past week. Those now include an Apple password manager, um, and Google has the Google password manager as well. So I'll mention, the Apple one, if you're using Apple devices, is free. It's included in the latest OSs. The Google Password Manager is also available for free. Um, there are some others available open source online that are free, and then certain ones like 1Password, Dashlane, LastPass, they are available for a fee. Um, I'm not recommending one over another. They all tend to be pretty good. And so whatever one works best for you. Um, I use one of the ones listed up on the screen, but again, I'm not trying to steer you one or another. They're all um, wonderful. Ava, Keychain was the older Apple password manager, but with the recent releases of iOS and macOS, there is now an application called Passwords that does this as well. So you're not corrected, Ava. You are correct. Keychain is in fact the Apple tool currently in there, but the password, if for folks who are updating to the new releases this week, are in fact it's called Passwords, and Google Password Manager is the sort of Android equivalent for those that like Android. I just want to do a few words on passwords. You've probably Reedy, in terms of being able to transfer passwords from one password manager to another, some of them do support that. However, some use, sort of more proprietary formats or encryption and don't readily support it. It's something you could look into when you look at them. Um, I strongly recommend trying one before. Most allow you to try before you buy, so you can verify it'll work on all your devices, and is one that you like. Um, I will say transferring them from one to another can be a bit challenging, but some do support that feature. Okay, going on to passwords. The main thing to know um, is that they must be unique. Never reuse passwords. A significant number of accounts are compromised because people use the same passwords among multiple sites. Just don't do it ever, ever. Um, they also should be of sufficient length and complexity. Um, the general consensus is they should be at least 16 characters, but the saying is longer is stronger. So whatever the maximum that a site will permit, you could consider using. The other thing about passwords, they really should be random. They should not be words in the dictionary, proper names, names of locations, any of those things, because there are plenty of dictionaries out there that folks can use to try to attack passwords. There are also reverse things called rainbow tables, where if a encrypted password is compromised, they can look it up in a rainbow table and see what the actual unencrypted password looks like. Um, so it definitely is. And by the way, as Ava just pointed out, the SO mobile app doesn't support passwords longer than 10 characters, and I really hope they fix that. And but they should be random. They should be mixed case, so upper and lower case, numbers and symbols. Many sites allow you to use Unicode or internationalized characters. If so, and you want to use them, go ahead. Um, so that's something to bear in mind. Passwords should always be used in conjunction with multi-factor where possible. And we're going to talk about multi-factor in a minute. But you should, if your only protection on an account is just a user ID and a password, you're already more at risk than if you add things like multi-factor or passkeys, which we'll talk about. So where possible, don't have just use, if they allow you to do a text message or a multi-factor of some sort, use them, and we're going to talk about those in a minute. The other thing to consider is using something called passkeys, and we'll talk about those in a little bit, but passkeys, it's actually a technology that's been around for a while, but it's really becoming common for more what I'll just call consumer applications and websites in the recent past couple of years or so. And so, if offered, you should consider using them. The other thing I'm going to point out, there used to be a saying about you need to change your passwords regularly. You should do that every 30 days or 60 days or whatever guidance you were hearing. The current guidance on this is that it's no longer a best practice to change passwords regularly. And that's because you really should be using something like a password manager, which creates very strong, unique, complex passwords, and would notify you if a site was breached, so you would know to change it in that case. Um, in general, one of the reasons people always used to pick memorable, easy to guess passwords is because they were changing them all the time. And so these days, the guidance is generally that changing them regularly is not necessary if you're using secure passwords and or multi-factor authentication. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, let's talk about multi-factor authentication. Um, if a site or service that you're using offers multi-factor authentication, use it. No matter what flavor they have, having it is much, much better than just having a user ID and password. Not using MFA increases your risk significantly. Again, just a user ID and a password is not as secure as having some additional factor of authentication. And what we mean by multi-factor authentication is effectively the idea that you will have a device or a piece of software that generates a code or some other information that's unique to that device or you and your account that you must enter in addition to your user ID and password. And so in the security world, they refer to this as using something you know plus something you have to secure an account. The something you know is your user ID and password. It's something you know. The something you have is either a hardware token or a piece of software that's generating a unique code. They typically change every 30 seconds for the most common protocols that you have to enter in addition to the user ID and password. And again, these come in multiple flavors. At the top of the slide, you'll see there's a token key and an RSA key, but there are also plenty of software. In the middle is a password manager that will do one-time codes as well for multi-factor. And at the bottom is, unfortunately, it's a little blurry, but it's a text message. SMS text messages are also available on some sites. One thing I'm going to say about those is if a site offers both either a hardware key or a software generated code versus a text message, choose the software code and store it in your password manager or the hardware key over SMS. Generally, SMS and text messages are the lowest level of security for multi-factor authentication because, again, your wireless service can potentially be compromised, or there are ways to get into the network and intercept text messages. We won't get into the details on that, but unfortunately, the protocols used to exchange text messages among the different carriers and networks were not designed for security originally. They were designed for ease of interconnection. And again, if you have high-risk accounts, like a brokerage account with, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in it, and they don't offer multi-factor authentication, they only offer user IDs and passwords, I personally would consider switching to a different provider if that were not any sort of financial institution or email service should offer strong multi-factor authentication. And so I strongly recommend that you use this in addition. And dovetailing with my previous recommendation of a password manager, all of the password managers will store and implement multi-factor codes for you for virtually any site. So you kind of get that built in. Not only that, but when you're filling out that autofill form, it'll fill in the correct user ID, password, and multi-factor security code for you automatically once it verifies that it's communicating with the correct website or service. So you get a benefit there. Okay, moving forward, passkeys. Passkeys are an established technology. It's been around for a while. In fact, many corporations or government entities have used passkeys for quite some time. Some in the form of ID cards that have to be scanned, into a device to be able to log into a computer or things like that. They've been around for a while. They make use of what's known as public key encryption. Um, they are much more secure than user IDs, passwords, and MFA because they eliminate the need for a shared secret between whatever site or application you're using and you, the user. And by shared secret, I mean things like the password or the information used to generate the MFA secure codes, etc. That information doesn't need to be stored and known to both sides anymore. And the reason for this is I won't get into the technology, but anybody that wants to talk about it, it uses what's called public key encryption, which is the same sort of technology that's used to secure our website connections and such. It's not the same, but it's the same concepts where you don't have to share a secret encryption key with every site that you connect to. Your browser and that site are able to negotiate it and authenticate and secure the connection without you having to do that. Passkeys are similar, um, and I'll point out yet again. I know I'm sort of beating on this topic a lot, but um, most password managers now do passkeys as well. In fact, the one I use when I connect and log into a new site, it can even alert me a passkey is available for this site, and it can help you generate one and set it up. And effectively, the way passkeys work is when you go to a site and want to authenticate, they typically exchange public key information and back and forth between your local device, either your computer or your mobile device, and the site or application you're connecting to. And they then require you on your local device to authorize that you want to log in. They do some additional communication and then connect. With mobile devices, for instance, like if you're on an iPhone or an Android phone, when you try to use something and it has a passkey, it'll pop up a message like a couple at the bottom of the slide. Do you want to use this passkey? And you can either enter a PIN or it'll use your face or your fingerprint, whatever you've set up to secure the device, to authorize the login. And you don't have to enter user ID or password. And again, there is not even one exchanged between. If you need a higher level of security, there are also hardware passkeys. And one of the ones I show on the screen there on the right in the slide is from a company called Yubico, but Google makes one as well called the Titan. And again, these plug into your USB port, or many of them will also work wirelessly. So if you have a mobile device or a computer that has Bluetooth, and you're trying to log into a site and it says authorize your passkey, you can just click the button on the device, on the little key. It looks like a USB stick, or plug it into the computer or device and push the button, and it will authenticate you and log you in. Again, without that hardware key, nobody can log into that account. And so passkeys are definitely coming. Um, Apple now includes them. Google now includes them. Other sites, I know PayPal uses them. Other number of other services also use them as well. Some banks and financial institutions have them available now as well that you can use to secure your account. Again, these are a little bit different and a little new, but definitely take a look at them and consider using them. They are more secure than some of the other options. And as Ava mentioned, she's considering using Yubico keys. I actually have both Yubico and Google Titan keys, and do use them, and find them both to work very well. Yes, you should have more than one, because if you are only allowing the key to be used, you definitely want to have a backup. So you definitely want to consider that. Okay, that's passkeys. The next thing I just want to talk about is everyone should practice good security hygiene. Um, what do I mean by this? Um, this isn't just about user accounts. Again, our digital identities and our the information out there are not just our user accounts. Um, Here in the United States, we have a very robust credit reporting agency system with a number of organizations that collect massive amounts of information on our financial health, our legal status, our how much debt we're carrying, how we're employed and how much we're paid, what accounts we have, and et cetera. And they are the key to getting credit. And there are similar organizations in other countries as well. I'm using the U.S. example. That's the one I'm most personally familiar with. Most of those services allow you to lock them. And when they're locked, no one can open new accounts in your name to obtain credit or new bank accounts or things like that when those institutions do credit checks. Most organizations that can extend you credit or open a financial account for you will do a credit check on you. If your account's frozen, they will not be able to see your information. They will get back a code indicating that the data is frozen. You can unfreeze temporarily. So if you want to apply for a car loan or a mortgage or a credit card or whatever, you can unfreeze um, to do that. Now, why should you lock these? A lot of people don't do this. I highly recommend that you do and consider doing so. Why? Virtually everybody in the world has had their personal identifying numbers compromised. Here in the United States, even just recently, there was another huge computer breach that basically ties everybody's name, address, and in the U.S. we have something called a social security number. Other countries and jurisdictions have national ID numbers and such that are often used to determine if you have for your credit worthiness and such. That's out there. Somebody knowing your name, your date of birth, your social can go and apply for credit in your name, and in many cases get it easily with if they have the correct information. But if you've locked your credit profiles and reports with the agencies, they typically cannot do that. And so it will really protect your financial well-being from people to be able to open accounts and services, financial services in your name. And there are three main ones here in the U.S: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. There are some other smaller ones as well, but I highly recommend if you haven't frozen your credit with them, that you consider doing that. The next item is lock down your wireless accounts. As I mentioned before, SMS and your mobile telephone numbers are often can be used to reset passwords. So somebody, if they are able to steal your phone number, can get into your financial accounts. This is used a lot in recent years with people breaking into crypto accounts to steal crypto money. Um, so most wireless providers in the United States and in other countries allow you to put a lock on your account that prevents it from being ported to a different service. Porting is the ability to take your phone number to a different provider. Um, The other thing that can happen is a SIM swap. Virtually all phones these days are based on the GSM standards of LTE or 5G, and those standards use SIMs, subscriber identity modules, to identify the device and mobile number. A common way to steal a phone number is to go into a store with fake ID. Now remember, all of our information is out there, our names, addresses, ID numbers, etc. So it's not that hard to try to impersonate someone if you really want to. Go into a mobile phone store and get them to swap SIM to a different SIM, and now they've taken over your phone number. All of the major carriers, such as Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile in the United States, allow you to put these locks in place. They have different names, but they do offer this, and I recommend you consider doing it. The next thing, and this is one you probably hear everywhere, so I'm not going to harp on it too much, but avoid being phished. And yes, that's spelled that way deliberately, PHISH. It's sort of hacker speak by using PH instead of F in words. But phishing is essentially sort of masquerading, as someone else or as a different website, and causing you to divulge identity information such as your ID password, date of birth, personal information you shouldn't be sharing, but they make it look legit, so that you'll hopefully do so. And to avoid, never click on links sent to email, text, messaging applications, or social media unless you know it's a valid link, and the provenance, that it's from somebody or a company or whatever that you know and trust. Never give out MFA codes, passwords, or personal details if requested by someone over the phone if they contact you. Now, if you call your bank and your bank says, oh, we need to know your date of birth, or we need to, your doctor's office will often do that to identify you. You obviously, in those scenarios, assess the situation and give it to them. But if someone calls you, I generally would, not give them. I had this happen to me in the last year. Somebody called me saying they were from the hospital's billing office and a bill had just been generated, and etc. Quite interesting. They seem to call before I even get the paper bill, but we'll leave that as a different discussion. But they call and they say, "What's your date of birth?" And I tell the person, I'm not giving that to you. You called me. That's exactly how you compromise somebody's identity. And I told them, I will call the hospital billing office directly and verify this myself. Now, in that case, I did, and it was, in fact, a legitimate call. And they said, yeah, the bill was just sent out 2 days ago. We don't know why they were calling you already. But, nonetheless, it may not have been legit, and I didn't do this. I didn't participate. Tim's putting out a good one as well about police contacts, that he had sent me as a message. But sometimes someone will masquerade as a law enforcement officer to try to get you information. So definitely something to bear in mind. Next item for personal hygiene, and I think you might have heard this one before. Use a password manager, user account password manager. They will definitely make your life easier. Always use multi-factor if it's available, or consider passkeys. And last, always be vigilant for scams. If something doesn't sound legit, don't engage with them. Contact the known customers. If somebody calls from your bank saying something and it doesn't, it shouldn't seem right to you in most cases, just tell them you will call the published customer service number and your credit card or statement or whatever, and talk to them that way. That way you have a better idea that you are talking to the right individuals. Okay, what are some actions you can take? Well, the first one is learn about best practices for digital identity management. Well, you've kind of done that today, so I put a check mark on that one. But some immediate steps you can do. Number one, if you aren't using a password manager, get one. Again, I won't harp on it, but it's probably one of the best things you can do for your security. The next one is conduct a digital identity inventory. If you go with a password manager, you can sort of do that as you move your accounts over. So you can sort of do this as a combine 1 and 2 and do it together by doing number 3, which is moving all the accounts to the password manager. Oops, we have a numbering problem here, and I'll fix that in the slides for a future version. But the next one should be 4, not 5. Lock access to credit reports. So if you're in the US, all the 3 main agencies do. It's free. It's also free to unfreeze them. There's no charge. You can create accounts on their websites, enter your personal identifying information, unlock your report right then and there, and unlock it when you need to. Zero cost. In addition, in the United States, they are required to give you free copies of your credit report up to once per week now. Originally, it was once per year. Then they made it more frequent. Okay, I'm back. Headset again. It's free and you can do it online. So the next one is secure wireless services with porting and SIM locks. Again, all of the wireless providers in the US, the big ones, do this and there is no cost. Next thing, while doing your inventory and get rid of any accounts you don't use. Leaving them out there is always a risk that they can be compromised. If a site or service allows it, cancel, remove, or disable. Some do not. However, if you are in the EU or an EU member country, most sites have to be able to disable or delete your information if you request under the GDPR. So if you're an EU citizen, consider using your GDPR rights if needed to get rid of unwanted accounts and information out there. And lastly, always practice good digital hygiene with the concepts that we talked about in the last slide. Okay, that's me. We're right at the time, but I'm happy to hang out for a bit and answer any questions you might have, either in voice or in text. I tried to answer some along the way if I could, but um, as I'm getting older, the ability to walk and chew gum at the same time gets a little more difficult. So if I missed any, let me know. Esperanza asks a question about how can you get your information off the dark web? Um, in general, I do not recommend paying money. So if you're ever compromised and someone asks you to pay a ransom to get rid of the information, in most cases, it is recommended that you don't do that. Um, in addition, if it's out there already, getting rid of it and getting it gone is next to impossible. There's an old adage that once something out on the internet, it's effectively there forever. And there's not much you can do about that because if it's out there, it's publicly accessible. People can copy it. You may never know where there are other copies of things. So, unfortunately, if your data is compromised and out on the dark web, which for those of us who do anything online or have accounts with any things, a lot of our stuff is out there already. There isn't much we can do about it. It's once it's available and it's copied, it is virtually there for the foreseeable future. So um, definitely something. It would be nice. Wisdom Seeker asked if she could get copies of the slides. Absolutely. And Delia pointed out that in the U.S. some will not allow you to remove an email address. That is a risk. A lot of them will let you change the email address, which is useful. But I know some just have really bad design and do not. But if possible, make sure that the accounts you use are not tied to email addresses you don't have anymore, because somebody else could potentially create an account with that email address and then be able to compromise your account. So you should always make sure that you have recent ones. So I see. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of digital hygiene. It's It kind of describes it, I think, pretty well. And Ava, and it's not just the dark web. The fact of the matter is, anything published, even on the open internet, um, is pretty much out there, and there's not much you can do about it. Some sites allow you to send in, like Google. You can ask to have things removed from search, etc. But again, that information is could have been copied elsewhere, and there's not much you can do about that. Um, and let's be careful here. The dark web is not really some alternate internet. The dark web is really information that passes over the same internet, but it tends to be done through encrypted or things that are not visible. They don't have published domain names, for instance, etc. But they're still as open as the internet in general. They're just not as visible unless you know how to go looking for them. And that includes Second Life. For instance, I have provisions in my last will and testament, which is in the United States a legal document for how you want to move assets when you pass. And I specifically have my Second Life assets mentioned there. Um, and Linden Lab has a web page all about that. In fact, about how if you pass, what needs to be in your will or your documentation to allow them to transfer your account to someone upon your death. Roxy points out about Facebook, and that's a good example. Though, to Facebook's credit, they do have the idea of being able to convert someone's page into a memorial page, which is kind of neat. Correct. Correct. And Apple has digital legacy capability. Google has similar capabilities that you can use as well to designate folks for that. So it's some organizations are thinking about this. Correct, Ava. You do need to set up your legacy in advance. I hope this has been helpful to folks, and that there's been some useful information that you can use. And if you think of any questions or specifics after the fact, you can always IM me. I'm going to be stepping away from the computer after this, but you're always welcome to message me anytime, with questions about, or if you think I got something wrong or should have added something, feel free to let me know. And I've received a couple of IMs, and I saw in the chat folks requesting the slides. Um, so that I can keep up with all of them, I would appreciate it if you do want a copy of the slides, send me an IM right now, and I will go through those, and I will send you the slides as a folder of textures. Um, so I know a couple of folks earlier asked in chat, but if you could just send me an IM in addition to that, it would be helpful, so that I don't miss you. Um, so I definitely happy to give them to anyone that wants them. I don't. I could consider doing that as well. All right. Well, I guess we conclude the session then. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. There were some awesome questions, and folks added a lot of awesome additional information, and I really appreciate all of that. I know a couple of people have asked Ree if there was this a video of this made. Okay. I think that some people are asking where it will be posted. Awesome. Okay. Thanks everybody for attending.